Leader Jeremy Corbyn is under pressure from his own cabinet to condemn alleged abuse and intimidation by the Stop the War coalition. Mr Corbyn's due to attend a fundraising dinner for the group. Some MPs have urged him to cancel, while the Shadow Culture Secretary, Michael Duggar, has said he should use the event to have a word with the organisers. So, should Jeremy Corbyn go to the Stop the War dinner or not? Joining us to discuss this, Chris Nineham, Vice Chair of the Stop the War Coalition, and also James Bloodworth, former editor of Left Foot Forward, now a columnist for the International Business Times. Afternoon to you both. James, should he go to this dinner?
I don't think he should, no. I don't think he should also continue his association with Stop the War. I don't think Stop the War are anti-war. I think they are anti-West. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, I think if the United States declared war on hell, Stop the War would find something favourable to say about the devil. If we go back in the recent past, Stop the War supported the Russian invasion of Crimea. Back in 2004, Stop the War supported the violent insurgency in Iraq. And more recently, Stop the War have invited people to speak at their events who are supportive of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who's murdered hundreds of thousands of people in Syria. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn should give credibility to this, what I would call a disreputable organisation. OK,
James. Chris Nineham, the opposition leader in Her Majesty's Houses of Parliament, should not be associating with a group that does that. What do you say?
Well, I think, of course, he should come. It's Christmas. We're having a Christmas party. He's one of our big supporters. Why wouldn't he? He came last year. He'll probably come next year. The kind of tittle-tattle and smears that are being circulated at the moment have nothing to do with the truth. It's not true we support Assad. It's not true we support Russia's invasion of Crimea, or I was told this morning we support Russia's bombing of Syria. All these are lies, fabrications, as anyone who is really interested can find out from our website. What this is really about is that the Stop the Wars campaign against the bombing of Syria, I think, has been very effective. We didn't manage to stop it, but we massively limited the Labour rebellion against Jeremy Corbyn. And I think public opinion is moving very, very swiftly in our direction. And I think this whole this whole series of accusations and allegations, which get more and more absurd and are centring around an attendance at Christmas dinner, for God's sake.
OK, but
all these are about, so it's a kind of displacement activity. What we really need to do is to focus on the issues, and the issues are, why on earth has Britain got into its fourth disastrous war against a Muslim country in 14 years, given the terrible record of the last three?
After the decision to begin the bombing operations in Syria, some believe there's been a concerted campaign against MPs on the Labour benches that voted for it. Does your group have any association with them, or do you completely deny that there has been any intimidation tactics?
I don't think anyone's saying that there's been a campaign again since the vote. I think the allegations, most of which have been withdrawn now, concern the fact that large numbers of constituents, through Stop the War and off their own bat, actually, were lobbying their MPs to try and convince them not to vote to take us into another war. Now, if there are MPs who don't like communicating with their constituents and they don't want to have a robust discussion about central issues of foreign policy or any other question, then maybe they need to think about a different kind of career, because as far as I'm concerned, that's what parliamentary politics is all about.
James, parliamentary politics is all about that, and after all, Jeremy Corbyn has had a long association with the Stop the War group.
I think it's perfectly fine to discuss matters with the Stop the War coalition. I just don't think he should continue to be associated with them. And I'm taking it back to something Chris just said. He branded the things I talked about lies and said that we should go and look on the Stop the War coalition's website to find out what it really thinks of stuff. I did that earlier, and I have an article here from March 2014, which is titled, "In the game of great power politics, we have to pick a side over Crimea. Let it be Russia." I think that's very clear where the Stop the War coalition stands on the conflict in the Ukraine, for example. It's with the aggressor, with Russia. I think we've seen very clearly where the Stop the War coalition stands on Syria. I mean, Chris talks about he stands against bombing another Muslim country. The most bombs that have fallen on a Muslim country are the bombs of Bashar al-Assad, whose supporters the Stop the War coalition have invited to their events which also they've often in the past refused to have Syrians speak at. So, I mean, to pose as anti-war, I find just absurd, and it's yet another reason why Jeremy Corbyn should have nothing to, or the Labour Party more generally, should have nothing to do with this organisation.
Well, we don't actually. I mean, it's not true that we support Assad. As I say, if you want to look at the statements that are made, democratically produced by the Stop the War coalition, if you want to look at all our positions, they're all absolutely clear. What we are against is the series of Western wars that have been conducted by our governments and by the US governments over the last 14 years that have been voted for by our critics. And I think really what the danger here is that all of this kind of becomes a smokescreen for what needs to happen, which is a serious scrutiny of the people who've been advocating and promoting these wars. Almost all of them. So hang on, let me finish. Almost all of them supported the war in Afghanistan. Almost all of them voted for the war in Iraq. Almost all of them voted for the disastrous bombing of Libya. That's the disreputable record, and that's the record that I think many people are understanding is part of a continuity with the bombing of Syria, and that's why so many millions of people are turning against this war.
Can I respond now?
Yeah, go, James.
I think it's absolutely fine to be opposed to the bombing of Afghanistan, bombing of Iraq, bombing of.
That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you.
For my part, I didn't support the Iraq war, which you usually throw at your opponents.
Most of the people that are pushing the war on Syria
Let me finish.
James, you go.
You can be anti-war, but then you do not put out statements in support of Russia's war in Crimea. You do not.
No, we don't. You're right.
You do not invite people like Mother Agnes, a supporter of Bashar al-Assad, to speak at your events. You allow Syrians, victims of Bashar al-Assad, to speak at your panel events. The Stop the War coalition has completely failed on those grounds. It isn't just anti-war, it's anti-West, which is a massive problem, I think.
Well, as I say, I think what's happening here is you're picking out particular examples that actually almost all of which are falsified. I don't believe Mother Agnes was. I don't believe that Mother Agnes was a supporter of Bashar al-Assad. But anyway, these are tiny details which we can argue about or otherwise. But the real question, exactly. Let's talk about the 200,000 dead in Syria, and we've just voted
to add to that figure. And you invite supporters of the man who's done it to your events.
No. But what I'm saying is that we need to discuss the real issues of foreign policy here. That's the question.
Which are the deaths of over 200,000 people in Syria.
Exactly. And what I'm saying to you, James, is the policy that you're supporting and the policy that
what policy do I support?
I'm assuming you support the bombing of Syria. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Okay.
No,
well, anyway, the policy that we're here to discuss, the policy that we're here to campaign against, is precisely the wars that our government is pursuing, and that is what needs to be discussed.
And your chair, Andrew Murray, has also said that he doesn't want to see a change of government in Syria.
These constant attacks, no, he doesn't say that, but these constant attacks, these trivial tittle-tattle and smears are a distraction and, I believe, a deliberate smokescreen to try and avoid that discussion taking place in front of the British public. It's a discussion that we are actually winning in British public.
For 5 minutes now.
Chris, let's James have a word, and then I want to bring the discussion back to another point. But James, you respond to that.
I can't see how it's a smear. I've just read the title of an article out from the Stop the Wars website, an article they put up last Friday night. Compared the fighters of Daesh to members of the international brigades. They obviously did see a problem with that because they shortly after took it down.
So it was an article that was withdrawn.
As I said,
and the reason that
let me finish. This is constant interruption. Let me finish. They've also, as I've already mentioned, had events where they've refused to let Syrians speak on the panel about their own country. This is just a disgrace.
OK, Chris, I'll come back in. We'll go all the way back. The point is about Jeremy Corbyn attending the dinner, to be sat alongside the types of people that James is talking about with the history. There are those that say, while initially the Stop the War group had very honourable intentions, actually it has lost its moral compass, and those examples are why the leader of the opposition should perhaps not be quite as closely aligned.
Well, I believe our moral compass is absolutely steady. We oppose the war in Afghanistan, we oppose the war in Iraq, we oppose the bombing of Libya. We were proved right on all of those three cases, and now, with complete logic, we're opposing the war on Syria because it will lead to more civilian deaths, it will lead to an entrenching and an inflaming of the civil war, and it will make the world a much more dangerous place. And can anyone really put their hand on their heart and say that it won't make a terrorist attack on our streets more likely? Our moral compass is absolutely clear. And I think
Okay.
if we want to talk about moral compasses, let's talk about some of the people who I believe have used a debate about whether we should fly our planes in anger to bomb a foreign country as part of an attempt to undermine the Labour leadership. I think that really is morally reprehensible. And I think if we want to criticise anyone, we shouldn't criticise a broad coalition that is opposing foreign intervention and foreign wars. We should criticise people who are playing party politics and internal domestic politics around the whole question of bombing. That really is a disgrace, and that's something I believe we should oppose.
All right, but Parliament voted with a majority for going ahead with this campaign. James, Jeremy Corbyn has this view, has been a supporter of Stop the War all through his political career. If he turned his back now, we would say he has lost his moral compass.
I'd like to see him genuinely change his views on the topic of the subjects of Stop the War. I don't want him to simply step away from the group for cosmetic reasons because he thinks it will play well with the press. I'd like him to re-examine his views on this. Again, I repeat, I have absolutely no problem with him being anti-war, with him opposing the airstrikes in Syria, opposing the airstrikes in Iraq. I believe he was right to oppose the war in Iraq. For example, the problem is when the biggest war being waged on the people of Syria now is by the government of Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. You're not, if you invite people who support that government to speak on your panels, if you refuse to listen to the victims of that government at your events, you're not really anti-war, you're just anti-West. And I think Jeremy Corbyn should reflect very seriously on that.
Just one final... Yeah, go ahead, Chris. One final point.
I think James's basic strategy or basic idea here is that if you fling enough mud, some of it will stick. I've said over and over again the truth, which is that Stop the War coalition doesn't and never has supported Assad. What we are against is the kind of foreign policy that successive British governments have pursued with such disastrous results. And that's why Jeremy Corbyn will be coming to dinner tonight. And I think what's really irking James and perhaps other people who are part of this massive campaign of smears and accusations that have been conducted over the last couple of weeks.
It's not a smear. I've read the things you've said on your website. That's not a smear. That's a fact.
It is a smear. It's a complete falsehood that Stop the War
So is the article not? Are those articles not on your website?
It is a smear, and I think what is worrying people who, in general, maybe James is opposed to war, I'll take him in his word, but the vast majority of our critics are people who support these wars, and I think what's worrying them is that there is
Peter
this
Tatchell's one of your critics.
Let me finish now.
These wars.
Well, actually, Peter Tatchell's got a very patchy record on foreign interventions, but anyway, he's a maverick. Let's leave him aside for the moment. The truth of the matter is...
He's a principled human rights campaigner.
Well, let me just finish, please, James. The truth is, I think what the pro-war party, who are essentially driving these criticisms and
We're
these...
not pro-war.
Hang on, let me finish.
I think you've
Are you going to stop interrupting me, James?
All right, James, let Chris finish his point and I'll give you one more say.
There is a groundswell of support, a groundswell of opposition to the bombing of Syria, a net switch of 31% in 1 week against the bombing of Syria, because I think people realise there is a continuity here.
All right.
That there are people in this country who want to take us into a series of dangerous and damaging foreign interventions, and people want to see an end to them. And I think that's what this is really about.
All right, James, one final word then.
I repeat, this is not an anti-war organisation. Andrew Murray, who's the chair of Stop the War, has written extensively on his support for the Russian invasion of Crimea. He's also said at a meeting in November that he doesn't think there should be a change of government in Syria. The biggest war going on is that being waged by the president of the dictator of Syria. And if you can't clearly oppose that, you're not anti-war.
James Bloodworth and Chris Nineham, thank you both very much for debating it with us. Thank you. And Jeremy Corbyn will be going to that party this evening.